philosophy that promotes the free access and distribution of an end product, usually software or a program. It may extend to the implementation and design of other products. The term open source picked up footing with the growth of the internet because of the need to create technology that may be customized according to the user's requirements and to end their dependence on expensive software. Such software generally gives users the freedom to run the software for any purpose, to use and modify the software, and to redistribute copies of the original and modified versions to others. These permissions are enforced through an open source license. Types of software in terms of accessibility. Closed source. The software that is exclusively controlled and modified by its original creators, person, team or organization is called proprietary or closed source software. In a closed source software, the source code can be accessed by only the authors. Free software. The software whose terms of distribution allows users to study, change and distribute it is called free software. This type of software is also permitted to be used for any purpose. Redistribution of its versions must also be distributed with the original terms of free use. Modification and distribution known as copy left. The free source are free in the sense of freedom and not zero price. Open source. The term open source in general refers to something that is publicly accessible and therefore can be modified and shared by anyone. In the context of software development, open source refers to a computer software whose source code is available to the public and may be modified, improvised or debugged. The original developers of the software may or may not charge a nominal fee for support and further development of the software. Difference between the open source and the free software. The main difference between open source and free software is that of philosophy and purpose. Open source is a development methodology where the focus is on improvising the software by opening it up for meaningful contribution from the coding community. Free software, in contrast, is a social movement where the focus is on the user's freedom. This freedom includes the freedom to run the program for any purpose, to study how the program works and to customize it. Access to the source code is required. To redistribute copies and to distribute copies of the modified versions to others. Open source model. The open source model encourages collaborative participation, transparency, meritocracy, and community-oriented development, where programmers publish their versions of the software back to the community. The OSI, Open Source Initiative Organization, outlines the following criteria for a program to qualify for an open source software. Free redistribution. There shall be no restriction on the sale or distribution of the software, partial or whole, and such a sale shall be free of any royalty charges or any other fee. Source code. The distribution program must include the source code as well as its compiled form. In cases where it is not included, the source code must be easily accessible from public sources on the internet. Derived works. The license must allow modifications and derived works. It must allow them to be distributed under the same terms as the license of the original software. Integrity of the author's source code. The integrity of the author's source code must be maintained. The license may require derived works to carry a different name or version number from the original software. No discrimination against persons or groups. The license must not discriminate against any person or group of persons. No discrimination against fields of endeavor. The license must not restrict anyone from making use of the program in a specific field of endeavor. For example, it may not restrict the program from being used in a business or for genetic research. Distribution of license. The rights attached to the program must apply to all. The program has to be redistributed without the need for execution of an additional license by those parties. License must not be specific to a product. All parties to whom an extracted program is redistributed to should have the same rights as those who obtain the original software distribution. License must not restrict other software. The license must not place restrictions on another software that is distributed along with the licensed software. For example, the license must not insist that all other programs distributed on the same medium must be open source software. License must be technology neutral. No provision of the license may be dependent on any individual technology or style of interface. Students, let's know more. A geographical indication (GI) is a name or sign used on products which corresponds to a specific geographical location or origin. Free and open source software, FOSS. The type of software that is both free and open source software is called FOSS. The terms of license for this type of software allow it to be freely used, copied, studied and modified, and the source code is openly shared so that people are encouraged to improve and debug the software. Students, know the fact. The world's first computer-specific statute was enacted in the form of a Data Protection Act in the German state of Hesse in 1970. Open source licenses. Open source licensing encourages collaborative participation by allowing third parties to study, use, easily modify and redistribute the source code. These licenses can be classified into two categories, namely permissive licenses and copyleft licenses. Permissive licenses, copyleft licenses. Number 1. BSD, Berkeley Software Distribution. Number 1. GNU General Public Licenses including GPL, Lesser GPL, LGPL. Number 2. MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Number 2. Mozilla Public License, MPL. Number 3. Apache 2. Number 3. Eclipse Public License, EPL. Number 4. Common Development and Distribution License, CDDL. Students, let's know more. Free Software Foundation, FSF, is a non-profit organization. Its primary focus is to promote computer user freedom to study the source code, modify it and share the program worldwide. It provides critical infrastructure and funding for the GNU project. The foundation also creates educational materials about free software and organizes yearly Libre Planet Conference. Its licensing and compliance lab defends freely licensed software, advises on licensing issues and certifies devices that respect your freedom. Permissive license. A permissive license is a simple and is the most basic type of open source license. It provides a software check uses with no warranties. It, however, requires developers to acknowledge the author or contributor. BSD licenses are a family of permissive free software licenses. These impose minimal restrictions on the use and distribution of the software. Following are the latest 3 versions of the BSD licenses. Zero Clause. It is the latest of BSD licenses. It was published in 2006. It was initially approved under the name Free Public License 1.0.0. Zero Clause BSD grants permission to use, copy, modify or distribute this software for any purpose with or without a fee. This version of BSD does not require you to include the copyright notice, license text or disclaimer in either source or binary forms. Two-clause license or simplified BSD license or free BSD license. The main difference between the 2-clause and the new BSD 3-clause license is that it omitted the non-endorsement clause and added a disclaimer about views and opinions expressed in the software. Also, it is compatible with the GNU GPL. BSD 3-clause or new or revised license. This version permits unlimited redistribution for any purpose as long as its copyright notices and the license's disclaimers of warranty are maintained. The version dropped the advertising clause from the previous version and added the non-endorsement clause, which restricted the use of the names of contributors for endorsement of a derived work without specific permission. MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, grants permission to the user of the software the rights to use, copy, modify, merge, publish, distribute, sub-license or sell copies of the software without any limitations and restrictions. The only condition this license imposes is that the permission notice must be included in all copies or substantial portions of the software. Apache License version 2.0 is an open source software license that provides a number of rights to users. These rights can be applied to both copyright and patents. The rights to use, modify, sell or reproduce a software that the Apache license grants are perpetual. These do not have an expiry date. You can continue to use them forever. Worldwide. Rights granted in one country are recognized throughout the world. Non-exclusive. Multiple developers can be given the license at the same time. Free of cost. The rights are granted at no charge. Royalty free. No royalty fee is charged on the scale of the modified versions of the software. Irrevocable. Rights once granted may not be retracted or repeated. Copyleft licenses. Copyleft licenses offer users the right to run, study, share, modify and distribute copies and modified versions of the software with the condition that the same rights be preserved for its derivatives. Copyleft licenses require that the source code must be made available to the recipients. The source code files usually contain a copy of the license terms and acknowledge the authors. GNU GPL. GNU General Public License. General Public Licenses are intended to guarantee the user's freedom to share and change all versions of a program and to make sure it remains a free software for all its users. The GPL is the most widely used free software license. It is a copyleft license, which means that the derivative work can only be distributed under the same license terms as the original software. The software may be distributed with or without any charge. GNU Lesser General Public License (LGPL). This license allows developers to use and integrate a software component released under the LGPL into their software program. Free or proprietary, without being governed by the terms of a strong copyleft license. It means that they are not compelled to release the source code of their components. Eclipse Public License. This is a business-friendly free software license. It includes weaker copyleft provisions than GNU General Public License (GPL). The EPL licensed programs and the modified versions can be used, modified, copied and distributed. However, in some cases, the developer is obligated to release the changes. Common Development and Distribution License (CDDL). This license allows the CDDL license files to be combined with the files licensed under other licenses, whether open source or proprietary. It is incompatible with the GNU General Public License (GPL). Students know the fact about trademark. It is a logo or symbol which is printed on commodities of business to make it exclusive. The validity period for a trademark is 7 years and it can be renewed. Proprietary software versus public domain. Proprietary software. Proprietary software, also known as closed source software, is copyrighted software. This software may not be freely used, modified, distributed, and is restricted by conditions predefined by its publisher, vendor, or developer. Some features of proprietary software are: it is primarily a commercial software. It does not provide its source code. It can be purchased or licensed for a fee. Copying, relicensing and distribution are prohibited. The user must agree to the terms and conditions before installing or using the software. The copyright holder may take legal action against the user in case the terms and conditions of the license are violated. Public domain. Public domain software is a program that has no ownership or copyright associated with it. SQLite, 12p, and CERN HTTP are some of the popular public domain software. A public domain software is a free and open source software. May be modified, sold or distributed by anyone. Unpatented and unrestricted by the developers by their own will. Students note that public domain software is often confused with freeware. Free software and freeware are, however, different as these are copyrighted. Students, let's know more. The GNU operating system entails GNU programs released by the GNU project as well as free software released by other sources. GNU has made it possible for users to freely customize and improvise programs according to their environment. Students, let us learn about freedom of information and the digital divide. The United Nations Universal Declaration on Human Rights endorses freedom of expression, which includes both freedom of opinion and freedom of access to information. The freedom of expression includes the right to see, receive, and impart information and ideas through any media. The Internet has played a critical role in serving this freedom of information as it defies all limitations of distance, language, and socio-economic status pertaining to expression and access to information. However, the rise of ICT has generated a digital gap between people with extensive use of the Internet, front runners, and those who have no access to modern technology, laggards. This gap is growing with every passing day, both internationally and within the nations, and is referred to as the digital divide. How to bridge the gap? The digital gap must be bridged before it is too late. It can be achieved with the efforts of both the government and the citizens of the nation. By the government. The government should conduct awareness camps in classes for the elderly to address their hesitation of using information technology. All the government institutes must be encouraged to propose various computer courses at nominal fees. The government should provide internet access to the remotest parts of the country. Farmers should be imparted adequate knowledge of ICT in order to increase their expertise in the field of agriculture. The government should provide computers and tablets at a low price to the students. By the citizens. You can help someone in learning computers by assisting and conducting classes for them at regular intervals. You can also give your old computer to a person who cannot buy a computer for themselves. Students, let's know more. The Respect Your Freedom Computer Hardware Products Certification Program encourages the creation and sale of hardware that will do as much as possible to respect your freedom and your privacy and will ensure that you have control over your device. Okay students, let us take a recap of this chapter. Computer ethics involve the code of conduct to use information technology in a responsible way. E-commerce stands for electronic commerce, which refers to the transaction of goods and services online using the internet. Fraud means purposefully misrepresenting facts to deceive another person for personal gains. Privacy is defined as the claim of individuals, groups or institutions to determine when, how and to what extent information pertaining to them could be communicated to others. Secure data transmission ensures that the user's data travels through a secure environment that is resistant to penetration and hacking. Intellectual property rights (IPR) is a term referring to the legal property rights of a person over his or her creations, both artistic and commercial. Software piracy refers to the theft of software through illegal copying of genuine programs or counterfeiting and circulation of products which are duplicate copies of the original. Plagiarism means using or imitating the language and the thoughts of some other person and projecting that representation as to your original work. Digital property refers to any digital information related to you or created by you. It may be stored online in the cloud or in an electronic storage device like a computer, a flash drive or a mobile phone. Open source is a philosophy that promotes free access and distribution of an end product, usually software or a program, although it may extend to the implementation and design of other products. The open source model encourages collaborative participation, transparency, meritocracy, and community-oriented development, where programmers publish their versions of the software back to the community. Open source licensing encourages collaborative participation by allowing third parties to study, use, modify easily, and redistribute the source code. Proprietary software, also known as closed source software, is copyrighted software. These software may not be freely used, modified and distributed, and are restricted by conditions predefined by its publisher, vendor or developer. The rise of ICT has generated a digital gap between people with extensive use of the internet, front-runners, and those who have no access to modern technology, laggards. This gap is referred to as digital divide. The digital gap must be bridged with the efforts of both the government and the citizens of the nation.